brain was going offline of functioning. It couldn't function the way it needed to. It couldn't. The pathways were blown apart. The swelling killed parts of it, and all of that was happening during that time. They were preparing my family for if I woke up, she'd be a vegetable. And he looked at me and I felt this beautiful vision. And it was like, why do you not love yourself or see yourself the way I see you? And then he showed me this vision of this beautiful being of light, like not human-esque, but just this beautiful light. And I could feel the love and I could feel the support.
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of The Soul Inspired. Today I'm excited to speak with Michelle Holling-Brooks. We've just been talking briefly, and we're going to talk about her multiple near-death experiences that she's had and other life-related topics that will come up throughout the conversation. But thank you so much, Michelle, for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe, for having me. And I'm excited to dive in and see where we go today.
I try to go back to your childhood, like little Michelle, and I try to figure out. So I don't know. I think I read in your bio or the information I got from you that the first near-death experience may have happened in your teenage years. Am I correct about that? Okay.
Yeah.
So can I get a little bit about who you were as a child before that? Like the type of person Michelle was, personality, school, around your friends, that kind of info.
Yeah, it's going to be from an interesting point of view right off the bat, because that experience at 13 was an illness that wiped me of my memory of prior to 13. So everything that I have to tell you about Michelle as a little being is, what people have reflected to me and what that is. And so that Michelle was this gregarious, like out there, joyful, fun-loving. The favorite story in the family is that I was meeting my soon-to-be aunt for the first time at my grandparents' house, and I flew open the door, and that she has this long hallway that leads to the family room, and they were sitting on the couch, and I just knew that I was meeting this person, and I was like 5 years old, and I was so excited, and I just ran down this huge hallway and did a flip over the couch and landed in the person's lap and was like, "Hello, how are you?" And so excited to meet you. So that's the story of that Michelle. That she also, the other story of her is that she was very connected. My mom would say that when I was little, I would speak for hours to corners, and she knew that I was having conversations and other stuff, and just to leave me alone and kind of let me do my thing. And so, animal lover, nature lover, all of those things. Is the story of those early years of Michelle.
Amazing.
But then that changes.
Yeah, well, and we'll get talking about that. Did you, or have you been told, did you have any type of upbringing around spirituality, religion, anything that would have been influential in any way when you were little?
Yes, and I was quite a problem child in that world. So my early childhood religion of origin was a fundamental religion. And so they were very structured, very much this is the way it is. And I challenged it, apparently. They had problems with me in Sunday schools. They had problems with me everywhere else. I just would challenge and say, that's not true. That's not what it is. This is what it is. And so I got taken out and put in the outside area multiple times is the story. And, that never goes well when you get taken out of the pew into the outside place and brought back in. And so, yeah, that too was very much of an issue and led to a lot of things post-coma, because post-coma, I had zero reason to agree with any of it. So any level of trying to figure it out in that fundamental religion definitely went out the door post 13.
Okay, 13. So we'll come back a little bit of that because I may want to ask a few questions around that. But let's go to when the first event happened. So you said you were 13, and how did you just mentioned that there was a coma involved. So how did you get involved with this? Maybe we'll lead up to the day or the time when that happened.
So I was in eighth grade, and it was the fall of my eighth grade year. So I had just started. And I was bit by a mosquito. I was an avid rider. And so I rode, we didn't own horses. I was the barn rat that was just always begging my parents to go to the place where I was taking lessons. And the horses had been in Florida and they had come back. I lived in Virginia. And there was an outbreak of equine eastern encephalitis. And there must have been a mosquito or something in the trailer, and it turned around and bit me. And so I ended up and dominoing into equine encephalitis, which is the brain itself is the lining of it and is swelling. And so encephalitis like makes a very unhappy brain. So that was problematic within itself. But then another problem is that at the same time that that was happening, my body lost balance and it dominoed into viral spinal meningitis. So my brain stem itself was swelling, and then the lining of my brain was swelling inward. And together, those two diseases combined and equaled a very unhappy brain. I ended up slipping into a coma for 7 days. And in that coma, I always do kind of preface this and say that I invite people to follow my story that was very literal with their own ways in which this has happened to them. Because what I've found is that this has happened to people, but just in different ways, that the things that happen. So in that coma, the swelling of my brain, they ended up cutting the back of it, putting me in a halo, all of that jazz. They were preparing my parents. And I also say my parents have their own experience of this. My family have their own. I'm not here to manage their story. That's theirs to tell. This is what it was like from my point of view. And so in that place of being immobilized in that coma, stretching out, my body lost total rhythms. Like, so all the things that you would sync to, your breath, your nervous system, all of that went offline. There was so much swelling to the prefrontal cortex that I ended up, when I did wake up from that coma, I was blind. I was deaf from, again, the swelling that was in there. I was paralyzed from the middle of my back down. But that's really not the problem. So think about it. You got a 13-year-old who's now deaf, blind, and paralyzed from the middle of back down. Totally fine, really high functioning, athletic kind of kiddo. Wakes up, not that. But the problem is what we've already talked about. Zero, I was completely wiped clean. I had no memory of Michelle. I had no memory of what was human. Think of all the conditioning that we have on board by that point, totally gone. So I didn't know I was human. I didn't know I was supposed to be interacting certain ways. I didn't know I could talk. I didn't know I could move a body. I didn't even know what a body was. So I was this very feral thing, stuck in a body that was completely disorganized, completely cut off from knowing how to communicate or that I should communicate, and only knowing what I was sensing at that time, which was an incredible amount of pain and disorganization, because the headache and the pain and the inflammation, while I woke up, all of that was still going on. I had just crossed that apex of the disease, but the two diseases were still running, and they're viral, so there's nothing people can do to work with them. My body just had to figure out how to work with it. So that's the situation of the Michelle that woke up post coma. And people do describe it as a near death experience because I did almost die. But to me, it's very different because a lot of, compared to the ones that I've had later in life that have like an attachment to understanding, an attachment to a shift of consciousness, so to speak. I had a shift of consciousness, but it wasn't in partnership with it. It wasn't in anything else like that. It's just a complete reset, but a reset into, I was wide open. There was nothing telling me what a human can and can't do. There was nothing telling me what the difference between me and the table was. There was nothing blocking me from just connecting into that grid that people try so hard to get to. But the problem was there was no self involved. So it was really problematic because I did not know where I stopped and everything else around me started. So that world was my first world. I know there's so many questions. We can go wherever you want.
No, no, absolutely. It reminded me right away, a little bit of because I interviewed Evan Alexander, who is a doctor he was a brain surgeon, I believe, and then he died of the same meningitis, and it swelled up his brain. It did all these things. Like his brain was clinically gone, like it wasn't functioning in any way. And that's why his story is so profound, is because he had this experience that was outside of that. So it doesn't sound like you had an experience during that time, because from what you're saying,
Not
you
that
just
I could access
yeah.
then. I since accessed that time frame. But I don't want to jump people to that because it's got to get a foundation. But yeah, I mean, I do have now where was I in that 7 days? But the physical piece of me was sitting in the hospital getting completely disorganized.
Okay.
The whole brain was going offline of functioning. It couldn't function the way it needed to. It couldn't. The pathways were blown apart. The swelling killed parts of it, and all of that was happening during that time. They were preparing my family for if I woke up, she'd be a vegetable. If she wakes up, she wouldn't do it. And it took people a while because I had range of motion in my upper body, and of course I fought until I couldn't fight anymore. And so they restrained me and they put me down. And they just thought I wasn't talking because I was in so much pain and I was just gutturally wailing. But it was that I didn't understand how to communicate. I didn't have language on board anymore. All of that was wiped out. So, like, literally everything that makes somebody who they are, gone.
Right. Wow. So, okay, so from what I just interpreted what you just said, you've maybe come to some revelations of what was going on outside of the physical during that time, but even though it wasn't like a strong memory like you've had in other near-death experiences that you've had. Is that correct? Say it that way. I just want to
Yeah,
ask that.
like in other ones, while I'm having them, there's that split level of consciousness. You're
Right.
watching yourself almost, and you're doing this other one. When you
Mhm.
come back in, you can remember that and you
Right.
bring it back in. And then the work is really like living the way of whatever you figured out in that near death experience, right? Bringing that wisdom, that knowledge into it. This one, um, that wisdom and that knowledge, what I brought back with me was just the absolute um, no that I had to all the conditioning. But it wasn't a choice of a no. It was just, I didn't know that you and I were different. So I would sync to your field. I would feel your field. It would be as if it was me. And nothing told me what you're feeling and what I'm feeling are supposed to be two different things.
Mm,
And nothing even told me that I shouldn't even be able to have all of what you're feeling and your history, so to speak,
yeah.
all at the same time.
I
And
think
that,
I was
yeah,
just
go
gonna say,
for
sorry to cut you off there, but like just a thought that came to me because I have two little ones right now, and my youngest being 4 months old. And it's interesting as a parent because you see that in babies where if you're feeling sad, or like you can see their immediate reaction, like they're reflecting on your
it.
energy so quickly in comparison to somebody at a store or something. They don't really care. They blocked out maybe that force where they can feel your energy. I mean, I understand all about that because of being an empath, but um I think babies in particular, because they've just arrived. They haven't been conditioned, so they can feel it immediately. Like if you get in a fight with your spouse, like they're having a tough day
Mhm.
too. Like, and they don't even need to know what you're talking about. They just feel it, right? So in a way, you kind of came back a baby as a teenager, completely wiped out and restarting. And that, I mean, that's incredible in itself. I guess the reason I had asked about, any experience happening is because one of the reasons why I think Evan's story is so fascinating is because so many, and I try to play, I don't know how many shows of mine you've seen, but I'm always trying to play a little bit of kind of an in between, right? Um, got the devil on one side and the angel on the other, kind of, it could be this. And I'm trying to always be like that in between person, trying to see both sides. And what's fascinating about his story is that a lot of people will say, well, when you're dying, it's just the brain giving you this enjoyable experience so that when you die, I don't know why. Like, I don't know what the point, why we would have that at the end of our, at the last part of our existence. But some people have concluded that, including science majors and things like that. So that's why I was asking if you did remember any of that, because, they'll be like, oh, see, she didn't. So that must mean, now I don't know what happened in the other NDEs. We'll talk about that now, but it's where the skeptic comes in a lot often. But there's so many stories out there that disprove that, which is kind of funny too, but they won't listen to those ones. They'll just find people that see she didn't have the experience
Yeah.
and her brain was completely brain dead. So what happened, right? I'm just bringing that up because it probably will come
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, I mean, and it's really true. Like what was happening with my brain because the areas of my brain were the very functioning ones. So what I can say is that my heart rhythms, the difference between um like my kiddos and your kiddos is in utero, we're syncing to the worlds around us. We're syncing to the rhythms, the heart rates, the energy. We're even tracking people's emotions and what's up. Like we're starting to get a heads up in that little utero of what's happening, and where our body is already starting to have a certain type of conditioning around it where it's like starting to recognize this heart rhythm, this energy signature, this way of working. So it already knows to seek. It knows to reach. And if you think back to like those moments where you probably held your newborn, there was a field that you could feel that was coming towards you, and you were going towards them, and there was this reciprocal, right?
Mhm.
um Take that out. I had no reach. I had no reason to look for it because I wasn't synced to anything, because all of those rhythms, all of those patterns were completely annihilated. And
Yeah.
so I didn't reach for anything. I was in a void. When I feel into what truly I felt back then, it was the furthest experience into that quote yin nothingness energy that you can get into in a meditation and like a transcendental state, like where truly all labels, all ways of being, all identifying marks are gone.
Hmm.
And it just is. And it's very archetypal, it's very impersonal. And there's nothing to tether you
Yeah.
into. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard of this space before. People have had, talking to some people, they've had this experience where they'll say to me, oh, I became absolutely nothing and everything all at once, but nothing and everything at once. I'm just like, what does that mean? And then they'll explain it kind of a little further. And I'll say, well, that sounds absolutely boring. And they'll be like, no, it was amazing. Like, it's like, because we're so used to the busyness of we're this person and we have this label and this is how we dress and this is what our name is. And like when all that is stripped away and your actual like consciousness or whatever it is we want to call it, it can be very like soothing because it's just your just existence, right? And so that's kind of what I pick up from what you're saying a little bit with that one. Um, so okay, so that happened. You are restarting your life and learning who you are. Now, how did I seem by your face, by your face there's something, did things become difficult after that into like the second NDE? Like, can maybe give us an overview of how that kind of came to be?
Yeah, so there's 10 years between the first one and the second one. And in that 10-year time frame, so the hospital became basically my organism. I got very good at sensing, tracking, feeling into all that is, because I didn't know that I should only be sinking into Michelle. That didn't exist to me. Once they figured out I was nonverbal and they couldn't figure out what was happening, I got to be very like they put like a little clicker in my hand, you know what I mean? And I could push a button when I felt too much pain or disorganization. And the shadows, as I called them, that I started to be able to really sync to were the nurses and the doctors. They came in, they did what they wanted. If as long as I didn't fight them, like it was fine. But there were three energies that I really found problematic, and those turned out to be my mom, my dad, and my sister. because they wanted something from me. So I started tracking them very early, and all I felt from them was this sense of they were reaching for me and trying to pull me towards them because they wanted something, and all I wanted to do was push away from them. Their amount of energy of what they wanted from me actually felt so assaulted to me. It was combative, it was painful, it was grippy. I just didn't want to have anything to do with those energies. And of course, they had the
Wow.
complete opposite. They wanted everything to do with this miracle daughter that woke up and, like, yes, she's got some problems. They didn't understand the extent of them. But I spent 3 months in that hospital, and that became my rhythm. It was predictable. I knew what to do. I knew how to track these three individuals, but they would go away. And then I'd be left kind of in like at least peace.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I was still in pain and I still had a lot of other things happening. I had started to figure out how to have a little reach, but not much. But then I got to the point where medically, good job body, it was breathing on its own. I had figured out to push a button. I had agreed to start eating again because I had no reason to eat. I really didn't feel um, the desire to feed myself or to do anything like that because I had nothing to reach for. When there's no labels and there's no nothing, why? Like why engage? Why do anything? So when I went home, that was a huge, big trauma because I went into the energy field where I couldn't get away from these three people. And every energy field around me, and as an empath, you can feel into this a little bit, felt so combative to me. Everything was trying to remind me of this Michelle before. And that became a 4 letter word to me. If you said the word remember to me, you better be ducking because if I could grab something and throw it at you, or I could energetically push on you, it was just not it was not a good thing. And because I also was nonverbal and I grew 4 inches in the hospital. So I went in a little underneath and I came like 5'9" and I came out 6'1". And I think that was my body's way of trying to disperse all of the energy. So I was in a lot of pain. Think of growing that much in that short amount of time. It was just really painful. And so everything about Earth School, the only thing I was starting to develop as a thought pattern is this was pain, this was torture. You can't run, you can't hide, you can't move away. All you can do is submit and freeze. So that's all I did. I just became the 6'1" snake that people picked up, moved, plopped down. I figured out that if I had bodily problems, people got upset. They got more rough when they moved me around to clean me up. So I figured out to start to just not make messes, not do anything. And if people feel into their own life, they can feel how they started to do that in their own way. Like just try to don't make a mess. Don't make people angry. Just keep them as calm as possible. And so I wasn't trying to figure out me. I was just trying to figure out how to keep these energies from having flares, which felt like assaults to me. And they kept wanting this thing called Michelle. I didn't know what that was. I had no language probably for the first 2 years on an audible side. But what I had was I was talking to things all the time. It was just on a different plane. So I didn't feel the need to talk audibly. And if you listen to me, you'll still hear different things because I had so much speech and other stuff like that. But I felt that I was talking to everybody because I thought I was, but what I was talking to was you, and I was talking to the different parts of you, and I was talking to your heart and your soul and all these different things. I didn't realize it was that. So that in itself is problematic because now I'm interacting with multiple layers and I don't know that's not normal because that conditioning is not there.
Right.
And yeah, question.
No, that's fascinating. So you're not talking just to Joe, the name of this person I was given. You'd be talking to me, um, to my essence of everything I am, basically, and probably including body and non-body. So you're kind of like just almost your awareness of what I am is there because I'm something, but there's no condition of what that something is. So you're just either feeling, you probably would feel easier. You probably would sense everything going on within someone really easily, I would assume, because you're interacting with their entire beingness, not just their human body and name.
And I had no allegiance to Joe. So I had no allegiance to however you were presenting yourself as that's the one that I would talk to. I would talk to whichever one wasn't the most combative, you know?
Eh,
Like, so it was like, like where other people might say, oh, well, this is the person, that's their energy field, and they would separate them. To me, your energy field was more real than the persona. You know what
right.
I mean? And so, and then your soul and your heart was even more real. And so then nothing made sense because by the time I got from quote soul heart essence through you, your version of self, through your protective parts and the personas and all the people that you carry with you and voices in your heads. Like you remember the Peanuts dustbin,
Oh
kind of
yeah,
that
yeah,
little,
yeah.
yeah, that's what people look like to me energetically. They were
Mm.
swirling with so many different things. It was so confusing to me because I was like, pick, like, why aren't we listening to the heart and the soul and these other aspects of us? Like, literally, we're whipping that part back. Like, no, I'm not going to listen to you, like, shoving it further and further and further back. So the protective mechanisms and the personas of who they thought they needed to be, who they've been told they are, those were like bouncers that I had to get through to get to this other part of you. But there's
Yeah.
the problem. I didn't realize that these were the ones I was supposed to answer at first. I kept trying to get to these other parts of you and invite that forward. For example, it was about a year and a half post coma. At this point, I had turned into a parrot, like a little parrot. I would mimic words really well because I could hear them. And what I didn't realize at this point was that I was hearing all these different things that normal, air quote, but everybody can do this, is really there. But what typically people were conditioned to just listen to. So I was sitting at a friend's house and we were in a little bench. And at this point, I was walking, um, thanks to a beautiful energy of a horse named Schedule. And we can go into that one if you want. But um, through working with him, I had regained the use of my legs and also learned a lot about for myself. But I was sitting in this bench and the cat threw up. And in my world, everything talks. And so I thought I heard the mom ask the question, why did the cat just throw up? I heard the cat answer because of the divorce. Now I'm like 14 and a half years old. I don't know what that word means. I just am a parrot. I had figured out whatever people are thinking the loudest, just say it back to them, and they got happy and they went away. They left me alone. And that was my whole purpose in life, was to get people to go away.
Hmm.
And so I just eating my little Cheerios, I just say because of the divorce. And I parrot it. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that's up to. Mom drops what she's doing. Dad energetically slams down the paper. This energetic eruption happens. My friend gets mad at me, elbows me. I don't have enough catch at this point, so I kind of fall over to like reclaim myself. And all of this because I just parroted back what I thought everybody had said. And that was the moment when I realized, because looking around, all of a sudden I was like, oh, that they didn't hear that and they didn't whatever. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
like
Wow.
I finally got it. And I was like, oh my, I can't talk because I don't know who I'm talking to and I don't know how to separate it and I don't know how to sort it. And it just became a hot freaking mess between 13 when I woke up and 23 when I was just like, I can't do this anymore.
So you
It
you heard
doesn't make sense.
you heard the divorce from the cat?
Yeah.
Okay. So okay, this breaks into something I wanted to mention before we get into the other NDE here, but you were okay, because one of the things I was going to say is you're hearing all the parts of someone. And again, disclaimer, I don't know this for a fact, but I've always felt this. When we talk about disease and we talk about illness and sicknesses that plague so many humans, right? I've always felt deeply that it's coming from within, that it's something that we're not hearing within ourselves. Like there's communication and messages coming through us that we're not. addressing, and it leads to those diseases. Okay. And I'm so sorry to say that because there's probably people out there dealing with that or have parents, friends, whoever. I mean, I've lost many people to these things. But I know for a fact if I were to come down with something, that would be like my first. I'd be like, I need to like figure out what am I not listening to? Like, what am I not hearing? And the reason I say that is this cat, I think back to a dog I had, and she passed not long after my mother had split with my stepfather, who wasn't the greatest person, but that to that dog, that was her parents. And when they split, the dog didn't last very much longer. Like it got very ill very quick, and it was gone within a year or so. Like it was pretty quick. And I'm assuming, just like humans, that my dog didn't know that it was probably doing that to itself in a sense because of the divorce. Same kind of concept. So here you are witnessing your cat having this throwing up. It wasn't feeling well. It was sick, and somewhere internally it knows what it's from, but even the cat itself probably doesn't know. Like I think animals are much more in tune than we are. Um, Or maybe the cat does know and doesn't care. It's ready to leave Earth school. It's like, okay, maybe that's why the communication came out. But I believe that those communications are also coming through humans, but we're not hearing it. And so that if we heard it and we could actually focus on it and work on it, it may help us kind of realign ourselves and get through these things. So I just want to bring that up because I was about to say it and then you talked about this story and I went, well, that's exactly what I was going to talk about. So that's really fascinating. So you were hearing something from the cat that was indicating why the cat was sick and no one else heard it. And you didn't even really know the divorce was happening, I'm assuming, because in your world, you were kind of just in your own space. Wow.
The mom had not and dad had not told the kids. So like I brought a bomb into that little kitchenette area of just doing a sleepover with a friend that wasn't planning on being there, but in the divine timing of things, obviously needed to be there because it happened. But yeah. So just side note on the domestic animals, so much of them when we're running intertwine in each other's energy fields. Our domestic animals, one, have their own thoughts, feelings, and desires about what happens to their quote humans. But then they also end up digesting so much of what's unprocessed in the humans that it leads to a lot. So that, for example, which we can ask your dog if you want to, but like it would be like maybe their own loss of that separation and losing of that person and that rhythm and that daily things, but then also the loss of the humans that they were feeling and they weren't processing. And dogs feel very much like it's their job to soften, to protect, to say. And one of the ways they do that is they mop up the emotions. So as an empath, where do those emotions go? They go to our gut. They have to go somewhere because we cannot. What I finally figured out of this whole journey is like I became a very good Swiffer sweeper. I figured out that if I cleaned up somebody's energy field, the anger, the emotion, the whatever, like I could take care of some of these dustpan bunnies, so much, so to speak. And then there was a better chance that they'd at least show up in a way that wasn't harmful to themselves or me. I increased the odds. But then now I'm manipulating their field. They're not learning how to manage their field. They're not learning how to take care of their field. They're not doing anything. I became a master at reading their shadow needs because their heart would have said, that's not mine, don't pick it up. You know what I mean? Like their heart would have said, Michelle, like, no, give that back. That belongs to me. It's my job to figure that out and to digest that and to take care of that. So it was their shadow wounds and needs that were asking me to hold things that were completely inappropriate, that were like, sure, yeah, come on in here and be my maid and clean up my energy field. And all that energy then had to go somewhere. It went into me. And so this is kind of what you were alluding to. This is the root of disease. It's got to go somewhere. We can't translate it. It then sits in our body like a festering tic tac until we recognize it and start to be like, oh, I want to give it back. And you think, oh, it's so easy, give it back. But not when it's linked to survival, right? Like not when we think we're being disloyal or rude or mean or selfish to give something back. there's a whole host of reasons um, that we can work through, but there's a reason why we just keep everything. And, it's not because we're trying to be martyrs, it's because we think we're trying to survive. And that's what was happening to me over those years is once I figured that out, I was like, holy cow, people don't want to deal with their stuff. People don't want to like work with it. And I either am going to continuously be that punching bag that shows that mirror to them. It doesn't go well. So what goes better is either I just go 2D, what I call it, like make myself invisible, or better yet, if I figure out what it is they need, what makes them happy, what they want, and I can hear that pretty darn clearly, um, I'm going to go reach in there and boot that up. I became a master shapeshifter at whatever that person wanted the most,
Huh.
not from their heart, not from their soul, but whatever would get them to behave nice. And so I call it the years of abuse because I had no allegiance to Michelle. I just wanted my world not to be painful.
Hmm.
So think about the things a teenager is who has no allegiance to self, no whatever, doesn't know any background, has no history on anybody. If somebody says to me, do this, and I feel like my world's going to get worse because I'd already been conditioned to give in. I'd already been strapped down to beds. I'd already been strapped into the abuse that happened in that 10 years is just insane.
Well, I was
And
going
then
to
I was
say to
done.
myself, as soon as you mentioned that, I thought to myself, okay, well, if you became essentially a magnetic, energetic people pleaser, is the way that I would put it, that could lead to some pretty terrible moments for you. And,
Yeah.
and for anyone, depending on what situation they're in their life, right? So I'm assuming that that started to happen because you just wanted comfort um, in people's energy.
Yeah, and then the way to like disengage from feeling all of that extra stuff in me that doesn't belong to me that now I'm stuck with is then I had to turn to other ways to numb myself and disengage the amount that I was sensing because now I can't say anything or do anything with it. I can't answer it. I can't share what my world is like. Everybody wants me to be this version for them. It's just easier to be. And so even more like true rage and hatred at this idea that I woke up. Like, why did I wake up? Like this is like a dumpster fire and a dumpster fire. And so the amount of rage I had at this universal thing. And every time, my family would bring in their fundamental views, this was a gift, this was, quote God. Like I didn't want to have anything to do with that. That was just so frustrating to the point where I finally said, I do not believe it. I do not want it. You can't force me. And at that point, it was going into my senior year. And because I just said no, this is only like 4 years post coma now at this point. Imagine a 4-year-old holding up their hands and saying, no, I'm not doing anything that you want me to do as this other person because it feels so not connected to me. They kicked me out. So now here I am, homeless, and I have one superpower to my field, which is I can please anybody. And I have no allegiance to Michelle because I don't like her. I don't want to have anything to do with her.
Right.
And so it just was problematic. And I saw zero reason. And then finally, fast forward to 23, I had just had an ending of a relationship, and I was on the floor of my basement apartment, and I just was like, I'm done. There's so much pain here. There's zero reason to be here. Took a handful of pills, and just was like ready to go. And that's when the second one came in, and it came through an animal again. So a horse helped me bring me back from the first one. And this was my beautiful dog, Baron. He was a German Shepherd. He licked into my mouth, triggered a vomit response. Um, all with me already passed out, sitting on his basement apartment. And I woke up in this puddle of my own vomit and, bits of pills in my hair. And he looked at me and I felt this beautiful vision. And it was like, why do you not love yourself or see yourself the way I see you? And then he showed me this vision of this beautiful being of light, like not human-esque, but just this beautiful light. And I could feel the love and I could feel the support. And I know animals don't lie, like humans, like, and I know that. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's real. She exists. I need to go find her. And I remember I was so mad that one, I woke up again. I'm like, oh my God, this is like round two of like not dying.
Right.
Like,
Right.
but that what I felt from Baron was just so genuine and so real. I remember when I like wiped down the bathroom mirror after I washed the vomit and the bits of pills out of my hair, and I wiped my hand across, and just this hollow eyes were looking back at me. By that point, it was so like just riddled with trauma and addictions and other stuff like that. It was just like I was looking at her and I was like, wow, she's so far from that vision. And I was like, I don't know. And that was when that seeker woke up in me. And it was like, I don't know how to get from this point to this point, but I'm going to find it because obviously I've woken up twice now. There's something here and I need to go find it. And so that's what really launched me into the seeker's journey, into healing, into how do you reconstruct self after it's been taken away? And so much of our conditioning takes it away. So, like mine was a pretty visceral way that it happened, but this happens to everybody, is what I eventually found out is like we lose our voice, we lose our ability to find ourselves, the people pleasing, the way we abuse ourselves, we allow abuse to happen. It's just all in there, right? How do we find our way back? I think that's what NDEs are about, is about helping us reconnect to that core essence.
Yeah, no, and what I find interesting about this, I appreciate you sharing that, is that you kind of were like, because a lot of people have the experience and they have this like, I don't know, they die, then they have this experience and they come back and they have to make sense of it, right? And some of them ignore it for a while, they think it was a dream, and then they start to make sense of it. You were kind of living a near-death experience for so many years. What I mean by that is you were seeing parts of people that majority of people don't see. Like we are so fixated on the physical, we're so grounded in the 3D that we're not aware of those other parts of us. You were already doing that. So even though you were here, you technically, like the way I hear it, it sounds like you had a very long near-death experience constantly. Like you were in between worlds for a very long period of time. Yes, the physical almost died twice, um, including the time, which is amazing that your dog had the intuition. I mean, it doesn't surprise me. Dogs do the most amazing things. And sometimes I see these AI videos they've made of dogs doing heroic things, and you're like, you don't even need to do that. Dogs already do these things. Like those are
Oh,
ridiculous,
there.
because they really do some of these things. They can stop people from having seizures and get them their medication from their fridges. Like these are real things that they can actually be trained to do. And on top of that, they'll go underneath you and try to give you a cushion so you don't hurt yourself. Like it's amazing, but it's intuition. And so they have an intuitive about them. And that obviously he had the intuitive, or your dog, he or she had the intuitive to get you to be sick so that you would not cross over. It was too quick then, right? I'm assuming you didn't have any experience when you took the pills. You just remember waking up and
Um,
almost being like seeing the dog's energetic essence is what I'm hearing.
yeah, so yeah, because I woke up in that real liminal space where I was already starting to I had withdrawn my energy from my body before I even took the pills. And so I was already like, I'm out.
Right.
Like the pills were just to get this system to shut down. And so yeah, that space in between is pretty much the liminal space is the way. And I remember the first time I came, I agreed to fully ground in my body, to like bring my essence into my body instead of being a little balloon kind of floating around behind. And I remember being like, welcome, welcome to Earth, Michelle. You're here now. Like, and in spirit and like all the pieces coming together and just really willing to be here, not just kind of here, but to be in my life with the same energy and love and realize that this place, my life, this incarnation, this is it. It's not about trying to get outside of it. It's not about trying to bypass it. It's not, I already did all that stuff. It was more, could I fully live? And now my motto is, how much of my beautiful soul's essence can I work with in this lifetime? Like, not hide or skip around in other versions. Um, and I think that's what we're all up to. Mine just happened to be a pretty literal version
Absolutely.
of it.
The other thing that I'm finding interesting by listening to what's happening, so even you explaining you obviously experienced yourself outside of your physical self to recognize that, okay, booting back up, coming back online, welcome to Earth, that type of thing or whatnot. So trying to refocus on my question here to figure out what
Yeah,
I'm trying to
sorry.
ask because okay, this is the way I'll say it. Including the audience, including myself, everybody we're all living different lives. Some of us go through trauma and a tremendous amount of trauma to a point where they don't want to be here. Then some of us have very easy lives in the beginning, and then it gets a little harder later on. Everyone's got a different journey, right? And some of us just, in essence, enjoy the process of being here. So they're enjoying it being here, even though it's difficult. They're like, there's this deeper. I think I would throw myself in that. I've had some traumas in my life too, but I think at its core, um, I think if I were to really be honest with myself, I would say to myself, I've done this many, many times. For some reason, I'm here again, and I'm trying to enjoy it while I'm here. Now, what that can do and what can that can instill, especially if you're not spiritually aware, is a fear of death, a fear of losing Joe, a fear of losing Michelle, a fear of losing the physical, right? What I'm trying to get at is you were not in that space because you didn't even want to be here. Let's just be honest. So, for those who are fearful of the loss of themselves, not the identity of necessarily Joe, but the loss of of my awareness, right? Like I'm aware of you here and I'm aware of this cup and the loss of that, you know, should we be afraid of that? Or are you pretty certain that we exist beyond the physical? Yeah, just wanting to know that because again, you grew up in a religious where you were the miracle child and God did this for you. So that's why I think there's a lot of confusion between like maybe God did do it for us, but in a different sense. Because you were saying that earlier on that you were a little bit almost like irritated by that sentiment, but at the same time, we exist.
Did
So like,
well.
yeah, I wonder if
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. It's a huge question. So, do we exist past this? My experience is absolutely yes. Um, And my experience is that I also work, I have a weird niche. In addition to helping people wake up and learn to work with them, their full self and all that beautiful stuff, I always have a space for an end of life client or two in my practice because conscious transition is a huge, beautiful piece of this, of how do we deeply honor this lifetime that we're in and also recognize that we are way more than this, and that but not to discard it. So that's one of the things that I find happens is then we bypass this lifetime and we just go straight to the big picture kind of a thing. And it's like, or we get too stuck in this lifetime and nothing else exists. It's like, no, we need to find a nice middle, the Goldilocks spot, right? That middle place that deeply honors we are in this life. And I remember when spirit finally got hold of me, it felt like it was like grabbing me on the shoulders and like, hello, Michelle,
Yeah.
like you are incarnated. Like let's incarnate. Let's feel life. Let's enjoy life. And yes, let's be of joyful service and supportive and not in that narcissistic place, but let's have as much wealth, health, and abundance, freedom, joy, love as possible and meet all that's also here, the gritty moments, the sad moments, the loss, the like, if you try to regulate one side, you're regulating the other. So what I find happens so much is we're so worried about loss, that then we forget to live, or we're so focused on living that we also forget that we're a part of this tapestry way beyond ourselves, right?
Mm.
And finding that middle. So I had another beautiful illness is just my teacher. It's just part of my contract. And so part of as I did that healing journey that I woke up at 23 and started on that, was doing really beautiful, but really wasn't willing to totally bring both worlds together. Was kind of timing out Earth School. I was like, okay, I'm here. I might as well make the best of this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, but if you asked me where did I want to be, I did not want to be here. And I was putting my suggestions to the universe that said, I mean, really, if I don't wake up, it's cool. Like it's okay. But I'm here today, so let me see what I can do to like help support the greater good. Um, but there was this piece of me that just really didn't have an attachment to my life the way other people did because that was severed at 13. And
Right.
so I just saw it from a completely different perspective, which is one of the things that I think NDEs do. They change our perspective, right?
Mhm.
Like they reorient us in what we're up to. But when I was coming into the end of my 30s, then I ended up with cancer, neuroendocrine sarcoma, which is on the endocrine system, which is our stress response. And so the cancer was a result of all those years of living in such fight, fight, or and functional freezes, which is what people pleasing and shadow things and blah, blah, blah. And ultimately, I had to really look at how did I want to work with this school? How did I want to do it? And so death became something that I consciously had to really look at. And at that point, I had two young girls. The type of cancer I had was not treatable through traditional ones. So really, at that point, I was in the healing arts and everything else like that. So put my money where my mouth was. Like, okay, Michelle, are you willing to bring all your tools to this and work with that? Because the top places, told me to just get my affairs in order and to go. And I realized at that point that I actually didn't want to go. Like, because I
Mm.
had my daughters, I had started my business Unbridled Change at that point. Like, all of a sudden, it was this really weird grief epiphany bubble laughter part where I was like, oh my gosh, I actually kind of want to stay.
Right. Wow.
And like here was my body was giving me an exit ramp if I wanted it. And the question is, how then, if I didn't want to take it, how did I want to live with life? In a place of flight or fight, or in a place of acceptance, love, working with harmony, wellness? Like, which one did I want to do in the very cells of me, the very tissue of my body? Which
Mhm.
one? And um, all of a sudden I was like, oh, I'm okay if I die. I really am. And I also really can see some joy and some love if I get to stay.
Mm.
And from that moment, that's when I said yes to my body. That's when my full life force energy came in. And they call it instant remission, went from 80% of my body, stage 4, to nothing in a day.
Anita Murajani, same exact thing after her near-death experience. There's so many people. I would use her name because it's a big famous name of the NDE community, but a lot of people have that and they come back and they have, oh, it's a miracle remission. It's like I don't know how it happened. And I'm not making light of that too much, but I kind of am in the sense that see what's interesting is you had this happen, you had your children and having kids is both a beautiful and very stressful thing. I have four in total, and but it glues us to this world. Like it gives us purpose and passion and love, and it gives us experience. Same with people who have animals and they keep getting animal. Like there's you're looking after a being of sorts, right? And you're now someone who is needed. And so I guess what's interesting when I hear your story is that that is probably the closest you came to being glued into the world. Like you were so like flighty ever since that experience as a teenager. And then now you have kids. I would assume that at that point you're kind of harnessed into the world, like whether you're working and you have your kids and you're doing that, you know what I mean? Now you're, even though you are still who you are and you still probably have all the senses and the, whether you're feeling people's feelings and energies, that's about as probably glued in as you were. And yet at that point is when you get the cancer. Is interesting. I just find that interesting because so many people get these things and they're probably not really paying attention to what's going on within them. And that almost seems like that was the time when you had to say, okay, what am I reflecting on here? Like, what is going on? And you had to kind of, do you get what
What
I'm
is my
saying with that?
real
Yeah.
view of Earth? Because like I had peace, I had tacked myself in. And I had made peace with, okay, I have a lifetime. Okay, fine, let me be here. But I really wasn't all in. Like
Mm.
I was still in that place. I very much enjoyed being mother. I've of being a steward to these two amazing souls, and to witnessing them. But what I realized through that cancer journey as my teacher, as my healer, um, is that like it helped me see that I was still behind the scenes living from this place of real fight or flight. I was still really living in this place of division, of not really loving myself. I just kind of reoriented and tacked myself in through this role of mother, of practitioner, of these different roles. But when I really sat with it, I I wasn't really here. You know what I mean? I was here, but I wasn't really here. My true connection and commitment to surrendering, quote, to this life wasn't here. There was a part of me that was still just timing myself out. And
Interesting.
when cancer came forward, it forced me to look at the veneer that I had created. It was a beautiful veneer. Anybody looking to the outside be like, "Oh my gosh, Michelle, you started your own organization. You have two beautiful daughters. You have a family. You have all this gorgeous abundance in your life." And I was incredibly healthy from the outside looking in, and all this other stuff. And yet I wasn't, because my life force wasn't here. I wasn't agreeing to truly be here. And so my system was running on a fraction of its own. I was in basic division. Um, and one of the things that I do like to point out is when I had that meditation and I sat there and I answered this question and I was really willing to come in and do that, I also was totally willing to transition, to die, um, but die whole. So even if my body couldn't recover from what the cancer did, I knew the cancer was going to leave my body. So that even if the physical organs couldn't recover from how far down the breakdown, I would have died whole.
Mm.
And that's one of the things that I think we think of disease as a failure if we don't cure it. But the disease is a vehicle to help us regain our wholeness. And so one of the things that I work with end of life clients on is like, we want to help you be as whole as possible, to see the grace, to see the love, to see the light, to feel that connection to your spirit, so that this life gets to transition with you into that whole from this place of deep gratitude. I'm blessed that my life kept going. I think this is part of it, to be that mouthpiece, to be
Hmm.
that teacher, but if it had gone the other way, I know that I would have been completely fine too. And I would not have seen that wasn't successful or I didn't heal. I felt so incredibly whole as I stood up from that, even with my body still trying to recover from just the 2 year journey of that cancer. Does that make
Right.
sense?
It totally makes sense. I guess what I'm sitting here listening to, and I love this, and I was because I was gonna ask you to start talking about kind of the work you do, and you've kind of started to briefly mention it, but I was I love that you said you decided to die whole or become whole, and you could probably say become whole, because if you know, obviously there's going to be people you work with throughout your life if you're working with people with different stages of things who will probably have spontaneous remissions, and then you'll have some people who don't. And um, I guess where you want to take each person that was that same space. You want to get to that same space. And what I would then say is it was likely the higher self that decided it was time at that point. You know, it was like, okay, well, if they still pass over, it means that, you know, there's something greater, there's something that's bringing us through it. And I've seen this with NDEers when they go over and they're sitting with whatever energy they're sitting with their beings, with aliens, whatever you want to call them. There's so many different names people will call these situations and experiences they have. And they will be told many times, like, you have an option here. You know, like some of them don't. Some of them is like, hey, um, this wasn't even an exit point, so you're not even supposed to be here yet. Like, you got to go back. But if it's an exit point, it means it was kind of a predetermined moment that you get to decide. Do you want to stay and continue, or do you want to go? And and speaking on exit points, I've said this on a previous show. You know, it can be little things too. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, I was driving and it was 9 o'clock at night. It was dark out because we're getting kind of wintry weather now, and I'm seeing this light in front of me, and I thought that light right there isn't red. Like, it's really bright. Why is that guy's car? And I'm driving, and next thing you know, a truck is coming at me head on. I mean, head on, like you see in the movies.
Yeah.
And within an instant, I just went off the road, and we probably missed each other by a few inches. And I looked in my rearview mirror, and he almost hit another car. Another car flew off into a ditch. No one got killed. I don't even know how. And then he somehow figured out he was on the wrong side of the road and went to put his signal on, of all things, and moved into the right lane, which is kind of humorous to think about now. Because, dude, just get over. Like, you don't need to put your signal on. If no one's, you know what I mean? If no one's there, you're safe. But my point is, within a few inches. I feel like I could write a book called "Within a Few Inches" because literally, if we're both going about 85 both ways on a highway, and you hit, you're not very often surviving that. And so that could have been likely what I would look at, like, at an exit point. Now there's times in my life where these
Mhm.
things happen. I just kind of go on to the next day and don't think about it. And it's not that we want to walk around thinking about those things, but you have to appreciate the life, because and also it shows you that there are moments when these things come up. And in your case, it was this cancer diagnosis, and clearly it was an exit point that was not taken, and you decide to continue on. And like I said, you're going to work with people who have these exit points, and some of them might. But from a physical space, what you're saying is we need to come in alignment with ourselves and find our whole selves. I think that would lead to less disease and less exit points really happening.
Takes out the excess, like we want to go a little Buddhist for a second, like it takes out the excess suffering. So grit is always a part of Earth School. Suffering is optional. How we want to work with that, how we want to view it, how much extra speed bumps we want to add in. The universe doesn't want us to have that excess. It's like, are you sure you want to pick up that backpack? And we're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But we don't realize why we're picking up that backpack. We don't realize why we're desperately clinging to it. And when the universe tries to be like, let's put that down, we don't need to be having this experience this way. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we just keep adding in all that extra, like from 13 to 23. That was me. I was putting a lot of that in that backpack. Now people were behaving badly and taking advantage and blah blah blah, but it was also a lot of me adding extra suffering into my life. It was a lot of me in those moments where I had tacked myself in but wasn't fully in, that I wasn't getting the full fruitfulness of the juiciness of life, right? Like I was skimming the surface, and so the amount of grace and joy, and I wasn't able to connect with it just because I had this ocean. I call it the ocean that separates us. And if we can start to drain that ocean, we realize there's so much joy, there's so much grace, there's all of the system. It can't take out the grit, but it sure the heck can pump this in over here. But because I was so dang angry because I woke up and then just the
Right.
pain that I was in, the process of that, I couldn't connect with it. So I think a lot of it is just connecting us with the joy that's already in our life. Like we don't have to go find it. It's already here. It's more about draining that ocean so we can connect. And that's why like my method is called the bridge of connection. Like, can we connect to that self through that quote pig pen of all of our protective parts, our wounded parts, our people pleasing roles that we think we have to, our beliefs? Can we start to lovingly sort through them, honor them? Because that's the piece that I really figured out through this whole journey is like, wow, even though it was really problematic what I figured out to do, it was the only way I could get into Earth at all. Like it's this weird puppet thing. And if I hadn't figured that out, I would have been rocking in a corner in some room in a hospital somewhere. I would never have even connected enough back into my life at all. So while it was problematic, it was better than a complete disconnection. So our protection parts, they really do try to help us. They don't get us very far, but they try they try to help us when we're right there. And so yeah, the more we can connect with that light and that joy, the extra suffering, the extra dis-ease that we are generating as the creator being that we are, falls away. And there's still going to be grit. Like I always tell people, it's not gumdrops and roses. Like I still am in a body that's turning itself over. I'm still in a world that we have to work with systems and things we agree with and things we don't. We're still having to work within the tapestry, but the way that tapestry feels, instead of feeling like we just have to time it out or we're a tissue to this lifetime, or we're in a dumpster fire, that's
Mm.
what can feel vastly different um, in this lifetime. Why wait for another lifetime to feel that way? Like
Right.
it can happen now in this one.
Wow. And it's kind of that same idea that not to let life happen to you, but create your life. Like you are kind of the master creator of our life. I think we're gonna, as we keep progressing through our existence as humans, I think we're getting there. I think that it's just taking some time. I don't know about you, but there's sometimes when things are happening and I'm thinking, okay, are we gonna speed up a little bit here? Because I've always been a little bit more connected that way. Like I've always felt more connected that way. But it is what it is. When you said the bridge to connection, these different pieces of what you do, like where do people connect with you to work with you? I'm just curious.
The easiest hub kind of is to go to my website, unbridledchange.org, because it is a nonprofit, so it's ORG. And from there, you can have a plethora of free resources that you can dive into. I have different social media channels of choice. And so you can just kind of pop into those ones. One of my favorite like entry points is I have a freebie that's called like the journey of transformation. And so it just walks people through like what is that revolt that happens. And sometimes that's illness, sometimes that's whatever, that involution coming inward. And we gotta turn into that little cocoon and then outward. Sometimes we just don't know. We don't know what these stages are, especially if you've had an NDE or something of a spiritual kind of a moment that's popped you out of that habitual world. You just don't even know, like, oh my God, what's the next step? Where do I go? What's in the, all that different stuff. So that would probably be the place I would point your people to. And it's just the first like freebie that's on my website. So they can definitely, find me that piece in that transformational journey. Having that roadmap is really helpful. But yeah, so I have workshops, classes. I've got books out there. My second publishing project is about ready to hit the things. The Sacred Witness Oracle, which is a Oracle deck, a guidebook that's an in-depth guidebook. I don't have it with me. Probably should start doing that. And then my second book, Trauma Informed Enlightenment. So those are the easiest places um, to dive in. But
That'll give us some direction at least for people who want to connect with you. I love that. Yeah, I'll definitely put any links to your website and the books and anything you're doing. Two quick things just came to me just as we kind of carry on to the end of the show here, but I wanted to, when you were having, it just came to me, when you were having that moment, you mentioned at one point that you were kind of, I don't know whether you felt like a ball of energy or whether you felt like existence or whatever, but you kind of understood, like, okay, do you want to we're going to come back and incarnate into this world kind of thing. Okay. That feeling. That
Mhm.
feeling, we call that like an out of body experience type feeling, right? Um, Obviously you were still connected to this realm because you were still witnessing you. Like you could probably still
Mhm.
see your body, whether it was from a distance or whatnot. But in those years after your injury, or the meningitis that had happened, not the injury, but the
Mhm.
okay. Did you ever have moments like that where you didn't feel like you were in your body?
It's the only way I live. I never was in my body. I was a balloon that watched this body move around. Like, um, I never felt, the only time I felt connected to that Michelle was when I was at the barn with the horses. But the minute I left the barn, I went back to a balloon. And that's where I lived, just watching this Michelle move around. I didn't really want to even interact with her or do anything with her. She just was running on the survival version of our like consciousness level of me. Um, I I didn't like her. I didn't want to have anything to do with her. I just watched her.
That's really interesting because so many people that have had NDEs look at they don't necessarily say they didn't like their bodies, but I remember so many have said, they leave their bodies and they kind of are watching what's happening, and then like, oh, I don't know what that thing is, but I really don't want to have anything to do with it. And then they'll see the light and they're like, oh, but that looks inviting. I'm going to go do that instead. Or and then they go off and they have this experience, and then they come back and they're like, oh, that thing again? Okay, I guess I'm going in there. And it's not that I don't think that's like a lack of love, but it's human flesh. It's an object. It's a vehicle, right? Like you can get attached to a car and really love it. And someday you look at that car and it's all rusted out and you're like, I do not want this car anymore. Like this car is terrible. Like it just doesn't get around. I've changed the brake pads 100 times. Like, you know what I mean? Same kind of feeling. So like I don't blame you for feeling the way you felt, especially because you weren't really even connecting into the body. So it was almost probably felt like a nuisance in a sense I would feel, especially if you were already outside of it and just kind of existing, right? You're almost like you're in this limbo because you're still in the 3D. Like you're still here living in this world, but you're amongst. That's where I think like ghost operations come from and these things that people who haven't crossed over, that's probably what's
Yeah.
happening. Does that make sense?
Way more here than we think there is. And that was my world. So this 3D world was very small, very like painful. It was painful. That's the best way. It was restrictive, it was painful. I didn't like it when I had to come in more into contact with this world. I wanted to stay in the other realms. And eventually what I realized is that it wasn't an either or. Once I realized that this you could weave them together and you could bridge these two and you can still access everything and work with everything. That's just a construct. A construct is that my five senses only work on the five senses. That's not real.
Mhm.
That's just totally it's a myth. It's
Yeah.
false.
Yeah.
And so and like they're actually designed to work multidimensionally, and where you think of somebody, you've energetically tapped them on the shoulder, and it's not a weird, oh my gosh, I saw them and then they call. It's like, no, that's how it works,
Right.
and so
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
creator beings that we are, I think what we're doing is we're catching up to the level of values and code of conduct. So I ran as what I call a messy empath, and I know we're at time. So, but I did not have a code of conduct with how I worked energetically, and that was problematic. That was problematic for me. That was problematic for the people that I was working with, or just living with. It was all shades of not okay. And then finally, I realized, oh, there's these things called energetic boundaries and hygienes. So I don't read you unless you give me permission to, and there's a reason that comes from outside of Michelle's just curiosity, or different things like that. So it's almost like what I call filters now that come
Mhm.
in. That's like, oh, you're just in, Muggle world, or you
Right.
can like be in this one. And I trust now that it's not Michelle that makes that choice. That choice is in this beautiful incident, the absolute, the divine, the universe, whatever you want to call that, that knows where to bring this, where to bring me, and where not to bring me. Right.
Right.
And so all of a sudden being a Michelle isn't a horrible experience because I was I had no way of filtering and working with what we can work with
Hmm.
in this spot. And the body had to seriously upgrade itself to be able to handle that bandwidth.
I think that's my
Um,
highest hope, including why I run this show, including why I continue. The only news I really watch is more the, I'd say, the paranormal type news out there, whether it has to do with who knows, like disclosure and things like that, is because I think that we haven't, I feel like we've been bottled in and not living like humans like we're supposed to. We've been held back. I think there's a lot of information we've not been told and we've been led in a different direction. I don't want to say too much or I'll get canceled, but I really feel that, and I think that we're getting to a tipping point where the things are flowing over. Like there's only so long that people can be held back until truths start emerging, and those truths, in my hopes, will lead to us living lives more as the human beings we're meant to be. Yes, we're supposed to be physical human beings. That's why we come and do this, right? And that's going to be one of the last questions I ask you here. But at the same time, if we're not using the senses that we were given, then we aren't living correctly. Like we are, and it's probably part of us. It's probably part of some sick journey out there. But we need to be becoming who we truly are so that we can actually become who we are meant to become. It gets really deep, and that could be a whole other podcast. But I don't know if you agree with that. Um, I don't want to.
you're pretty close.
Yeah.
You're pretty close. Yeah. So the intro of my second book, Trauma Informed Enlightenment, is what you just said. From my own visions and my own quests of what I have seen and what I've connected with, and where I've been and experienced, what we're experiencing as humans is a de-evolved version of a trauma response of generations of power and control, fear, uh, the word, the fine, if that's a word, a version of what we are. And so what we're running off of now is a very limited and restricted way that we're supposed to run. The way I ran when I woke up from that coma, that's our state where there was no separate. I could feel I could go into any place in that anywhere um, that I wanted to. And then my physical body stayed put, but eventually, that we'll figure that out too. But we are so de-evolved and so separated from what we are, not what we can become, but what we
Mm,
are.
okay.
And so that's the journey. And to heal that trauma, that will also give us the foundation that we need to really honor life. Because if we start to honor and love and have those compassions, how do we wake up to that? We wake up to it by honoring that we have the power to either give love and life, or we have the power to take that away. What are we choosing to create? That's the question.
Hmm.
And the only way we'll get here, that place that you're talking about, and not just in kids and candy stores, really misusing, even on a huge level, is if we grow that consciousness with it. And so that to me is the healing power of being able to witness each other, and to see each other, because everything has value, all life, human, non-human, planet, like we
Mm,
need to live from a completely different value pack. And so, yeah, oh my gosh, I
yeah.
could talk for so
No,
long.
no, I love it. I love it. And you're totally right. And yeah, I think the word I think why I said becoming is because I'm looking at it from not only like, yes, I think I'm already living within that space of what my possibility is of who I am, but I'm looking at it from a humanitarian space of
So,
who we
yeah,
are. Yeah. So, and yes, we could flip it right now, all of us, right at this moment. Um, and I think we are. And I think the more individuals that do that, the quicker it'll just become a oneness of everyone in that space. And then it's time to answer questions, right? And then it's time to, okay, what were we doing? What was going on? And I think everyone's starting to feel that. And it's an internal feeling. Everyone. I can't tell you how many times I go on TikTok or Instagram or whatever, and people keep saying, "Do you feel this something's happening. Like, I don't know what it is. I just have this feeling. Well, people have feelings for a reason. Like, there's changes happening because we're all feeling it. It's not because we're all losing our minds. We're feeling something shifting, and you just got to honor it and allow it to happen. It's going to keep happening. That's why I keep saying the resistance is something that's always going to be happening in all of our lives. But at some point, resistance is overtaken if it's not serving the betterness of who we are. Like if it's serving something of power and that's gonna eventually fade. Like it, no matter what, I just don't see it over. It's the same thing. Someone will say you go into a dark room with a light. Well, you light up the room. You go into a light room with dark. You can't. Like if something's dark and you put a light in it, it's gonna start showing itself. So um, that gets really deep. But okay, this has been an amazing conversation, and we're gonna wrap it up. But I've loved talking to you, and I do encourage everybody to check out all your work, like what you do. I always end the show with just a simple question. Actually, it really does, because you went through a lot, and you went through a lot of trauma, and you went through pain, and you went through all these things. And if outside of this physical body, if it feels better, if there's things to be, if there's other realms, if there's other things that we are, why would we come into this this shell and put ourselves through it? Like, what is the main goal? Like, do you have any feelings around that?
I can only answer that from where I'm at right now. I'm agreeing to be in this lovely little form. Is what Spirit said to me is really truly embodying and working with the polarity of the grit and the density with the choice then to move from love, not fear. And so that is really it. Like, are we willing to embrace our creative nature as creator beings? And are we willing to move from love and not fear?
Hmm.
And uh, eventually I said yes to
Yeah.
experiencing that. And eventually I said yes to to be on that journey, because it's a never ending journey. But how much more can I move from love, and how much more can I let go of moving from fear?
Mm. I
Can you
love
imagine
that.
those ripples?
Yeah, no,
If
amazing. I love that. And that all in essence is experience, right? Like maybe it's as simple as we want experience. We want to experience the physical. And I will say, as much as like there is hard times in life, like there is some beautiful moments in life. Like there are some moments where you can't probably have that without a physical incarnation. Like, like just even holding your baby for the first time or just like little things that yes, it's beautiful in the time we're like, oh, that was great. Oh, but I'm gonna focus on this horrible part of my life, right? Like it's because it's so much easier to focus on that. So it's like try to enjoy the things that we have that are beautiful, right? Because it can be. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I've loved having you on. I always turn to the audience, say, please continue to like, share, and subscribe to the Soul Inspired. It helps me get amazing guests on the show, like Michelle. So thank you so much, Michelle. I really appreciate you coming on today.
you
So vision. So